So how many of you out there have actually got to hunt or live in ridge country? Now, not a lot of us around the country get to experience this on a day-to-day basis like some of you out there. This is that Mississippi River Valley, if you will, talk, where a lot of you guys in that region experience this a lot. And the folks in flat country, farm country, sometimes flat farm country, don't get to experience this, and it never really becomes an issue. But today we're going to talk about just that. We're going to talk about ridge country, and in there we're going to touch on a few points here. One being thermals, two being stand placements, three transition areas, and four the access. So let's just talk about, and everybody has heard this a million times, but let's just talk about the thermals. Let's really kind of touch on that for a second, so the folks that don't get to experience it on a day-to-day basis can learn something from that. So when you travel from a area that doesn't have the contour that like I was saying, that Mississippi River Valley has, there's parts of this all over the country, but that river bluff country, anywhere that there's river, but that river bluff country, off the Wisconsin River, off the Mississippi River, you go down into Ohio, into Kentucky, any of that ridge country in the Knobs area of Kentucky, where I was at earlier this spring or this winter, all of those you can connect with this, and you can learn something from this if you're traveling, like I said, from a spot that doesn't have it, and you're going on a hunt, or you're leasing some ground, or whatever the case is. It's always a good idea to have a knowledge of ridge country and how that works. So let's start out here, like I said, with thermals. Thermals in the morning, obviously, whether you're deer hunting, elk hunting, anything that sheep hunting in that real rugged country, rolling country, is something that you have to take into consideration. So thermals, obviously, in the morning, our thermals raise. The steeper that is, and the warmer the temperatures that are, all kind of coincide with each other about how fast them thermals raise, about what is in that line of the thermal that can slow that down. Is it open ridge? Is it a south-facing ridge? Is it a north-facing ridge? So all of that has to tie into it. The point there on the AM hunts is the thermals will raise. No matter what the contour is, after a certain point, those thermals will raise. So to keep in mind, on just the opposite, in the PM, obviously your thermals will sink. So like I was saying, there's a lot of variables that will slow that down. There's a lot of variables that will speed that up. In the PM, one of the things that will speed up the pull of thermals is if there is water in the bottom. So it works both ways. I touched on this not too long ago with a client in ridge country, and we really, he was having trouble with some stand placement, and I really needed to, I have to refresh myself on it sometimes, because it's just not something that you do every day. And we'll talk about when we get into stand placements, we'll talk about kind of some reverse psychology that a lot of us are used to. So what happens here is, let's use early season. Let's say September in southwest Wisconsin. Those areas there, if you have water down below on these, and it's not just from ridge to ridge, and it's just a valley, this water in the bottom in the early season is actually cooler. In the early season, it's actually cooler than your air temperature. So that will actually cause the thermals to not pull as fast. So then we get later into the year, we get into, let's say, October, November, where the air temperatures are lower, and then that water is actually warmer. It's not cooler anymore, it's actually warmer than the air temperature. So what happens is then that's when you get those real strong thermal pulls down to the bottom in an evening set. Same goes for in a morning set. If you have this water influence in the bottom, that's really something to, if you are right on the Mississippi River, are you right on the Wisconsin River? I mean, are you hunting up the banks of the Ohio River? All of that stuff, you really have to take into consideration if you're right on that water. And the best way to experience that is you go back to that old milkweed, and that is so powerful. I've remember sitting in the stands, having clients in the stands in Calhoun County, Illinois, and taking milkweed, and down there it was when the puffers first came out, and they had all kinds of little fuzz that we used to peel off and throw. And just watching the thermals in the morning would amaze you, whether there was water in the bottom or not. So really take that into consideration. What is on the bottom? What's at the top? What is restricting not only your wind in these situations, but you have a bunch of conifers that are stacking up that are going to make create some swirls. All of that has to be thought about in ridge country setups. So number 2 is stand placement. How do we place stands in ridge country, knowing that this AM, the thermals raise in the morning, the thermals set in the PM? How do you go about hanging stands to take advantage of ridge country? Well, here's something that we're going to talk about in kind of in depth here. Is there's a I'm not going to call it a myth out there, because it's something that you can do. And there's a couple folks that are watching this video that this is gonna really kind of key in on with you, because we've talked about this in the past. And this is something I feel very strongly about. And I can honestly tell you that if I hadn't lived and guided in ridge country before, especially like in Illinois, Calhoun County, Illinois, when I had my property in southwest Wisconsin, around that Eastman area, that Boscobel, Eastman, those areas have educated me on this situation for the good and the bad. It's all been for the good because of experience, but I have tried to cheat the system many times, and there's pieces of the puzzle that we're going to talk about here that I think a lot of folks don't take into consideration, because in their way of hunting, in their regions, it's all ridge country. They're used to playing this game with the thermals and the winds. And there's a couple pieces of the puzzle, though, that I think that I had actually just talked with a client last week when I was in Wisconsin, that it was something that I seen that he didn't see, because that ridge country mentality, I think it's just a repetitive nature that we have, that all of us have, no matter if you're in ridge country or not. But I think it's just looking at your ridge country as just thermals raise in the morning, they set in the PM, and my wind is one way or my wind's the other. But there's certain parts that we have to talk about here, and we're going to talk about stand placement with the contour. It's not always just a roll from the top of the hill to the bottom. So one of the situations that we're going to talk about, and like I said, it's not a myth because you can pull it off. But so the first situation that you always hear of in an AM sit, when the thermals are raising, that you can actually sit in a stand location such as this, and we've got the chart here. So the north is to the to the north, east is off to the right here, west is down to the property line or down below. That is how this we're taking this into consideration. So in other words, this is we've got the stand just over the ridge here, just over the ridge. It makes for easy access getting in, because a lot of times your cover up here, the ridge falls off on the other side. You watching your access, which this all plays into. Coming up the ridge, they're dropping into the stand. Here's what one of the topics is that a lot of folks try to pull off, and there's just certain things that you have to make sure that it's perfect, because if it's not perfect, it's time and time again, I'm one of them, that it will get you into trouble. Eventually this strategy will haunt one of your setups. And as we were talking, a client that I'm speaking of here last week, as we were talking, he started telling me a story that they've hunted this way, or he's hunted this way, and he has killed some really good bucks out of this setup. But there was just one time that one of the biggest bucks that as far as I know, that probably that he has ever been after in pursuit on his property, that one time had a buck come in and locked up on him, and he didn't feel like he really winded him, but he knew something was up, and he went out and around him. So in my world, I don't have that. If I know that I'm cheating the system, and I know that could potentially be a problem, I'm not willing to risk any deer doing that, but especially the hard-earned time and the hard-earned dollars that I've got into that sit. I'm not willing to make sure that all my access and everything is correct and have a chance to blow that opportunity. So, because we obviously, all of you that are tuning in, you know those opportunities don't come along every morning, right? So here's the scenario. The deer travel here is running north and south along the bank here, coming around in front of the stand. We're hunting the stand, we're accessing from over it, and we're getting into the stand. The equation is we're hunting this in the morning, thermals are raising, so we're above the trail, but we're hunting it on an east wind, blowing the wind over the top of the deer, and the thermals are raising. Well, that can happen, and it does work, because I'm here to tell you that I've seen it work. I've been in the tree stand when it works. I've also got this client that I'm speaking of that is a testament that it works. So it does work. But here's the problem. The problem is, so two things. So one thing to keep in mind is this contour right here, this contour line at that stand location has to be, it has to be perfect. There's no, and I don't know what the perfect degree is, but it's something that I've learned to see. I don't know if is that a 30-degree angle, you know, is it a 40-degree angle, is it a 45? I'm not sure exactly what that elevation change is. I've just learned to experience it, and I'm just here to tell you it's steep. I don't know what the, you know, like I said, I don't know what the degree is, but it's steep. So here, this is why I drew this little belly in this right here, this little kind of this, just a slight bench. So we all like to hunt the benches, and that's a very powerful piece. When I'm designing, I'm looking for benches. Now, if I'm building them, I'm you know, actually designing and carving them into some locations that are on native hillsides. So this little bench right here is just enough to get you into trouble, and the reason that is that the AM in the morning, the AM thermals are raising. If you hunt this on an east wind, which you can because you're blowing the scent completely over the top of them, because this, like we said, this contour is steep, so you're blowing the wind over the top of them. So here's the issue though. If this is an open ridge here, your chances of getting away with that are better. So if this is an open ridge, just a few scattered trees down you know, the ridge, it might be, you know, 70, 80, 90 yards, 100 yards, or whatever that case is to the bottom. And this is, you know, just that little change in elevation here makes this makes this wave of this AM thermals coming up through there. So you have that movement already in your thermals to watch. That's one. So two, the other thing is when you're blowing the wind over the top here, headed, you know, your wind is going now on an east wind, you're forcing the wind over the top of their heads. That's fine. But what happens is in this situation, as the thermals are raising, you now create this, the thermals are raising, your wind is in here. At some point, you are going to get this effect. And what plays into that is, what I have found is this. One is that little bench, that little change in the contour line will start that flow. Two, what happens is more structure is on this bank. Well, because what happens is, let's say your density is down below, and we're hunting a transition area that has been opened in the center. What happens is this is the center. So now this is the difference in the difference in the wind block, and it's also difference in the change of temperature. And what could happen here is when this thermals are raising and that wind is going over the top of them, you're going to get this swirl. And so I recommend that this doesn't dump back down on this trail. So obviously we're 25 yards, let's say, you know, these stand locations, 25, 30 yards from that trail. And you just need to make sure that you always hear me speak of clean air. And that clean air has to be able to get up and raise above, and nothing obstructing it here. So that's the first equation. The second equation is change in temperature. Not change in, you know, not anything that you're doing, because you're already in the stand and this is working out perfect for you. The thermals are raising, going right past them, you're blowing your scent over the top of them, and you've got multiple deer, you've had multiple deer in the past coming in there. Well, So let's say that this is 20. Let's say it's late October morning and it's 20 degrees, 25 degrees when you get in the stand. Let's just use 20 degrees. That cool, crisp first morning, end of October, and that the rut is starting to creep up on us, and it's that ever popular time. You get in the stand at 20 degrees. An hour later, it's 24 degrees. 2 hours later, now it's 10 o'clock. Now it's 9 to 10 o'clock. And now it's creeping up on 30 degrees. What is happening is the warmth that you get in as the sun comes up. These thermals obviously raise faster. The warmer that it gets per the clock, the faster that these thermals raise. If this wind changes, so you've got 20 degrees when you get in there in the morning, and now it's 30 degrees. And then you take your winds from 5 mile an hour, and now they drop down. And let's say at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, your winds completely die down to nothing. Well, here's the problem with that. This is going to that change right there from 10 to 5 to 0 is just enough to create this belly right here, where all of this happens and dumps right back down on that location. Now, is it going to be at the time that buck that you've been after for years or all year comes into that location? There's probably a slim chance that it's going to be exactly when he walks in there. Here's the deal, though: it happens time and time again. So just some things to keep in mind. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to tell you that situation doesn't work, because obviously, like I said, I know it works. It goes against a lot of things that folks on non-ridge country aren't accustomed to, like I said, but it works. So so keep that in mind. So the third thing to watch for is this. The third thing to watch for is let's just draw this out here real quick. Let's say this is your 40 acres. And let's say this stand location is in your northwest corner, about right in here. And from here down, and this line that I'm making here is the ridge. The top of the ridge, and it comes all the way down, something like that. It has a few bends in it, and it's in that location. So you're hunting this on a east wind to blow this over the top of the trail. All this property right here drops off to the outside. So the third and most important thing that I watch is this. I think this is where a lot of folks get themselves into trouble. You have to be able to, for this to work, for this all to work, for all that wind to blow over the top, the thermals to be in your favor, for those deer to be able to bypass underneath you, to be on top of them in a morning set. You have to be able to get to that stand before this even works.